From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. My name is Jonathan Small and I am your host, and my guest on this week's episode is Colleen Higgins. And Colleen is a pharmacist, an author, and a speaker who helps translate the often complex world of pharmaceutical and cannabis medicine into accessible language for patients and caregivers. She has a new book out. It's called The Cannabis Prescription: How to Use Medical Marijuana to Reduce and Replace Pharmaceutical Medications. Sounds good to me. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jonathan. Happy to be here.
So before we get into your book, which is really interesting, I want to talk a little bit about your origin story. How did you become a cannabis-friendly pharmacist?
Interesting story. Well, for anybody that's been in pharmacy for a while, we know there is a missing link for a lot of patients that don't receive relief from the traditional pharma therapies. I live in Connecticut. Connecticut had a medical program that was approved in 2013. And that was right around the time I was working in the disastrous opioid epidemic. I was looking for an out. The industry had really changed a lot, and I had an opportunity to submit for a license. I did not win a medical license in Connecticut, but I was offered some jobs in the dispensaries, which do require pharmacists to work. And I just got a passion for it right off the bat. It was amazing to see the patients that received relief so quickly. It became important for me to understand how to discuss the medication with people and start people on medication. When somebody comes in and says, yeah, I've never used THC before, but I'm having all these symptoms, help me, you better figure it out. So I quickly figured out a dosing regimen and schedule, and I've just seen the most amazing things happen with people. So I've really gotten a passion for it, and it's just blown up. You know, the industry has expanded on an exponential scale over the last decade and continues to expand because of the relative safety of cannabis, and it's just becoming more and more accepted.
So talk to me about your book and the origin behind why you decided to write this book. I'm really intrigued by the subtitle, which is How to Use Medical Marijuana to Reduce or Replace Pharmaceutical Medications. So why is that so important to you, do you think?
Well, as I mentioned, people would come in at the beginning and say, this is my last resort. Can you help me? Ooh, that's intimidating. So I realized that they can only absorb so much information regarding the medication. So I talk about the delivery systems, right? We have 4 delivery systems. Then we have THC and CBD, and even more cannabinoids come out. So as I explained it and I kind of figured out what I called my spiel, I realized a book needed to be written to support these patients when they go home. So if they're on pain, or they're dealing with pain, I should say, and they're looking to come off of the opioids or looking to come off of benzodiazepines for anxiety, they need a recipe. They need the products to steer towards and the ones to steer away from, and the dosing that's appropriate for most patients. Because the pharmacist just really understands the drugs and the dosing, right? So we always understand what dose to start with, the frequency, how often do you take it, and how to increase that dose until you find the effect. And that's what I did with the book. So patients can utilize it as a real medicine, and it's not such a mystery and it's not so scary. So I saw a real need for it. And funny enough, after writing it, I actually had a lot of pharmacists contact me and say, such a great book. I'm using it to learn. I'm using it to train other pharmacists. So it kind of expanded into a training manual as well, which made me very, very happy because there's limited teachings for pharmacists, and we love knowledge. We love to know everything about it. So if you don't have somebody teaching you in school and you have to go searching for it, it makes it really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, limited knowledge for pharmacists, limited knowledge for the consumer too. I mean, as far as dosage, it's very confusing. I've been working in cannabis for years and I still don't quite understand the dosing regimen, which I want to talk about. But you talk about reducing or replacing pharmaceutical medicine. Why cannabis instead of traditional pharmaceutical drugs?
Sure. I think it's Cannabis Moment now, right, John? It's the moment of cannabis going on right now. The prohibition is ending. It started with Charlotte's Web and the seizures and CBD helping that. And people were like, okay, enough. This does have medical value. We're not willing to listen to the lies anymore. And we want this as an option for patients. So if not only for that, for the kids with the seizures and the CBD, that's a non-psychoactive molecule, right? So it's safe. It's good for people. But we have the opioid crisis, and I was right in the middle of it, giving people opioids, the amounts they were taking, the depression, the suicides, the deaths. So as an option, you have a lot of people that are coming in saying, hey, I don't want to be on this anymore, or I have this complex regional pain and I don't want to start on opioids. I'm 35 years old. If you're on an opioid to start, you're going to stay on an opioid for life. And that comes with all kinds of side effects. It's a mess. So it naturally started to progress. Another disease is Parkinson's. Parkinson's disease is an effect in the brain where you have lesions in the brain, and it can lead to all kinds of symptoms, stiffening. Most people think of the shaking. Well, most people don't know that the pharma drugs available are limited, and a lot of them stop working over time. And then as the disease progresses, you can't even take them. So there wasn't an option for these patients, and they would come in and they would be looking for something and needing something, and it worked so well for them. Also with glaucoma, right away, the first patients in were glaucoma patients that did not have effective pharma drugs for them. You know there's drugs out there, but do they work for everybody? No. So it was shocking to me as somebody who gave out these drugs for decades to say, wow, they're not working for everybody. And we still have people that are suffering. And to see the cannabis be successful for a lot of people, I thought, why is this not as available as the pharma drugs? But we know why.
That's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole lot of story in that, yes.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about dosage for a moment, because I think that is, as I said, confusing to a lot of people. Now, does your book takes people through the sort of the process of figuring out what dosage is right for them? Is it preferable? And it's certainly different for everyone, right? That's the issue, is that everybody has a different, and cannabis is very individualized, right? And everybody has a different process. It's not like just take 2 hits and call me in the morning.
Yeah. But one thing is true, is everybody as a new cannabis user starts off the same way.
Okay.
So as you get more experience over time, your tolerance is going to be different, but everybody starts the same way, low.
Interesting.
You want to start with the low dose. There's no reason to start with a high dose. I had somebody when I was working in the dispensary close by to my house, and they just caught me walking by. Said, yeah, this patient has a question. They were brand new. She's like, yeah, I wasn't really sure what to get. So, this is my first time here. I've never used cannabis before. Are these the right products? She had all concentrates, which are high dose oils to smoke. And then she had 50 milligram capsules. Oh, and I said, 50 milligrams, why'd you pick that? She goes, well, you had 5 milligrams to 200 milligrams. It was right there in the middle. I figured it was a good place to start. And for anybody that knows cannabis, somebody that's never taken THC, taking 50 milligrams is a horrible afternoon.
Horrible day. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, horrible day. And I've heard a lot of patients in other dispensaries where they're like, oh, you want to recommend a 10 milligram starting dose. I would never recommend a 10 milligram starting dose for a new patient. You want to start them off easy. If they have a bad experience, they will never come back to it. They will assume it's wrong for them. There are patients that are extremely sensitive. They should start on 2.5 milligrams of THC. The average dose is 5 milligrams of THC, I think, today. And if you blend it with a higher amount of CBD, it can actually decrease the psychoactivity. So little tips like that, specific starting dosages, mixing it with CBD, that can really help somebody that needs to try it for these different disease states. And most patients are not looking to get high. They're looking to get better. They're looking to get out. So if you make them uncomfortable with THC, you're going in the opposite direction of where they want to go. So it's essential to get that starting dose down. And then eventually when they've got a handle on it, they can do whatever they want. But we're here to teach them how to begin their journey effectively and safely.
Now, what if they don't have you? Because a lot of dispensaries don't have a pharmacist there, especially for recreational use. Can they do it on their own? Can they figure this out on their own?
I think it's tough. There's so much confusion out there with all the information. It'll go all over the place. And you watch videos where people are doing concentrates like it's a disease or something. It's insane. So I find that if they can find a book like this, I'm actually also creating a training course, Elevate the Cannabis Prescription, which I'm just finishing up and going to be launching in the next couple of weeks to train pharmacists. Because a lot of pharmacists I've worked for have actually turned around and gone back into pharmacy because the lack of training has been confusing for them. I have a passion for it, so I've just kind of dug in. But it's important to find somebody that can give you the knowledge before starting on that path. My book is a great place to start. The website also gives information, but get information before you dive in from an expert or even a doctor or a nurse. There's a lot of healthcare professionals getting involved these days. And we all kind of have the same voice about it. Start low, Go
Go
high
slow.
slowly,
Yeah.
go slow. It took me a while to understand, to tell patients only to take one puff. I didn't
Mm.
do that at first. And then the 78-year-old ex-smoker took her big joint home and smoked the whole thing. So you have to tell people one puff, 2 to 3 seconds long, no longer than that. Give it a few hours, then take another puff if you need to. Very just baby steps. And then once they have their way and they've got it, then they've got it. They don't need us anymore. But you do want to get educated before you start. You don't want to end up taking a 50 milligram edible on your first day.
Right.
That afternoon, you'll want to go to the hospital. It's just not what you want to be doing. So,
Do you find you gradually need to increase, like once you kind of find your happy place, does the body, does it get used to it and then you have to actually start increasing the dose after a while?
it can be. Most patients that are looking to suppress symptoms, take it on a medical basis, they'll find a dose that's comfortable. If you keep creeping up with THC, you can go into that anxiety zone
Yeah.
where you don't feel so good. So I tell patients, you can keep going up. It's kind of like opioids. Opioids have no ceiling. You
Mm-hmm.
could keep going through the roof, but are you really handling your pain? You have to kind of evaluate and be very aware of what you're taking. So patients can keep taking more and more and more and more, but are you getting better effects or are you just getting more side effects? So it's important to realize where I encourage journaling. It's important to realize where your maximum benefit is with minimal side effects, because after you keep going up, you're just going to keep getting more side effects.
Let's talk about side effects. We know there's side effects with opioids and a lot of pharmaceutical medicines, but what about cannabis? Do you see side effects with cannabis?
Sure. I think the biggest one is with CBD, and people can look this up. CBD, plant-based CBD, is in the pharmacies under a GW Pharmaceuticals drug called Epidiolex. So
Mm-hmm.
they've done the research for us. It's great.
Yeah.
Generally, the biggest side effect is stomach upset. So
Mm-hmm.
if you take too much CBD, it can start to cramp your stomach, make you a little feel stomach upset. And the thing is, though, if you're a cancer patient, CBD is fantastic for the inflammatory problems that are going on in the body. I mean, so many of them, but you do want, a lot of patients need to increase their appetite. So that's important to keep that side effect on hand. CBD can also cause headaches, like a mild headache that just doesn't go away on higher doses, sedation as well. So you can look up the side effects of CBD. The pharma industry has done it for us. THC is pretty easy. You take too much, you're not going to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's anxiety, it's sweaty, it's racing heart. A racing heart actually is fairly common with THC, more often with inhalation than with oral dosing. So people with heart issues sometimes get a little nervous, and that's something to watch for as well. You can have a drop in blood pressure sometimes. So little things like that. There are side effects, and people do want to know about them. So I talk about all that as well.
Yeah. What about being addicted? I think some people who don't smoke cannabis or have known somebody who was like a pothead, quote unquote, feel like, oh, that person was addicted to pot, like didn't have a necessarily in the end a good effect on them. And that could be objective. What's your take on being addicted to marijuana?
Addiction has a two-prong. First of all, you have to have a medication that when you take away, it's going to give you that withdrawal process. So opioids obviously have an extremely strong withdrawal process to the point where people can die or feel like they're dying. Alcohol can kill you. If you reach high enough levels on a
Mm.
regular basis and take it away, you can have seizures and you can die. Cannabis, there was a study, I believe it was the NIH many years ago. It was on the same level as caffeine. So there is a withdrawal process, and patients that use high amounts concentrates daily, they can have some sweating and some chills and some headaches. They can get pretty snappy. If they're using it for sleep, they can have trouble sleeping. If they're using it for anxiety, their anxiety can go through the roof. So when you take it away, your symptoms can go back up. There is a level of withdrawal. It's just not the same as some other medications. So, but mentally, I think people might have a more of a mental dependency on it. So if they use it, like I said, for anxiety and you take it away, is it the same thing as if you take away somebody's after work cocktail, and they come home and they want that cocktail or two to relax, and you take that away? Are they going to look for something else? Are we going to look for maybe a cake? you
Yeah.
know, Something else that's going to give us that calm dopamine release in our brains. So there's a level of dependency to it. I think it's manageable. I think people probably, and I've seen people abuse everything from opioids to Benadryl to mouthwash. So people will abuse everything if they are under stress. And I think it's just a symptom of their anxiety or their issues that they are dependent or using cannabis to comfort themselves. And judgment Judgment comes in every direction from our people here.
Yeah, of course.
Course.
You mentioned early in the thing there's 4 form factors of cannabis. Can you explain those to our listeners?
Sure. It's the delivery systems,
Right.
right? So how we can put it into our body. The first is inhalation. Most people think smoking, but we have vaporizing as well. If you vaporize the flower at some lower temperatures, you're kind of in your most healthy zone. Goes right directly into the bloodstream. Very predictable response, and quick. So if you're having anxiety, if you're having nausea, if you're having shakes, you can quickly take your dose and it's going to work super fast. For patients that can't inhale, like some people just can't inhale or don't want to,
Mm-hmm.
you can use sublingual. Sublingual delivery also goes directly into the bloodstream. Quick action, lasts for about 3 to 4 hours. More limited products to choose from, but a great delivery system. Next, you have the oral dosing, which is a little more complicated. Edibles. It typically takes about an hour for most patients, but that's not a rule. Some patients take up to 2 hours. Some patients are a little bit quicker. But because that goes through the liver, you have to absorb it through the gut. It goes through the liver, that goes through something called first pass metabolism. You have a much lower amount available in the bloodstream and it's less predictable. When patients take it on a regular basis, again, a little help with journaling, they can kind of figure out their best dose and their scheduling of it. Typically, it takes about an hour to start working, 4 to 5 hours of active feeling. So most patients we have dosing about every 5 to 6 hours if they're taking it for chronic issues, which is great for people that we've had hospice patients. These are patients that can have a brownie every 4 or 5 hours. They're getting a little food and they're getting their medication in them. So great way of taking it, just a little more tricky. And then finally, you have the topical products. If you do use THC topically, you can have a positive drug test. That's important. But for patients that have achy hands, achy fingers, achy knees and feet, it can be another great way or another layer of having you get some medicine into your body at a local place, which is great.
I should mention here that, and not to do a shameless plug for Wana, which sponsors the podcast, but they have they've worked on a fast acting formula, and I don't know if you have experience with that in Connecticut, where the edibles have a little bit, you're able to metabolize them quicker, just given the sort of technology. Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, the nano.
The nano technology, yeah.
Yeah, the nano technology. It does work faster. Works like 10 to 15 minutes. You basically take your molecule and you cover it in a surfactant, which makes it more water friendly and it gets into your body quicker. The surfactant for a lot of people, unfortunately, can cause a bit of a headache or a little stomach upset. So, seems like a great idea. It actually is if you need it to be faster. Sometimes you have to dilute it, and the surfactant can taste pretty bad too. So there's pros and cons to that as well, but you can get that quicker action with it. Yeah, for sure.
That's great. How do you decide for somebody why they would do an edible as opposed to a topical or a oral? I mean, not oral, a smoke inhalation.
Yeah, I leave it up to the patient. So I like to explain everything. That's why we have an hour, right? I have an hour with this patient or a half hour, whatever it is. You got to get the important facts into them and let them choose. So that's why I wrote the book so they could take it home and learn more. But I leave it up to the patient. I say, listen, a lot of people walk in to a medical dispensary and they don't want to smoke. They have no interest in inhaling anything. It's bad. So I, right off the bat, tell them inhalation, fast acting, short acting. Oral dosing, longer duration for it to kick in, but it typically works 4 to 6 hours for most patients. So these are your choices. If you're not looking for it, sublingual, these are the products we have. A lot of them have alcohol. So if you use too many sprays, they can hurt. And then I leave it up to them. Let's try. At the beginning, you just want to try. You want to see what you like. You don't know what a lot of patients will come in just looking for edibles, but then they don't like how long it takes to work or the extra psychoactivity. Edibles do cause more psychoactivity than inhalation because of going through the liver. So it's just a matter of what they choose. And I'm here to help them with the dosing and the frequency.
Would you say, sort of in percentage wise, the clients that come and seek you out, are they mainly managing pain or is it all over the spectrum? What are their chief issues?
I would say pain's probably number one. Pain and nerve pain. There's not a lot of good meds for nerve pain. I would say that is probably right up there with, say, anxiety and sleep. Sleep is probably number two. But pain, because our number one patient group these days is senior patients, right? So everybody over 65, you hurt a little more. Your diseases are a little more exacerbated. So, and once you get to being an older patient, you're not supposed to be taking the opioids. They're not good for you. So you're getting more pain, and then you can't take the medications that you normally would. So what do these patients do? So the doctors in Connecticut, at least, I know I've talked to some people in Colorado, and some doctors get penalized out there for prescribing cannabis, which is such a bummer. But here, it's taken off a little bit more slowly, and the doctors have embraced it as an option for their patients that deal with chronic pain. So yeah, I'd say pain's probably number one. And usually the combination of CBD and THC. You can max out on THC because you take too much, you're not going to feel any better. But if you throw in CBD, CBN, CBG, there are all these other molecules now that blend together really nicely, and you get that blend, that entourage effect. People are finding great relief for pain. Maybe not 100%, but still a nice option, right? Isn't it about having more options?
Yeah. Do you, in your personal use, do you use cannabis?
Sure, absolutely. My number one thing is sleep. Once I had my daughter, that was it. That was 14 years ago. So my sleep off the charts. I love it for pain. Right now I'm dealing with plantar fasciitis. I make my own CBD oil. I take about 30 to 40 milligrams in my coconut blend twice a day. It helps tremendously with that foot pain. So I use it for pretty much anything and everything. I absolutely love it. Topically, I think it's my favorite. But edibles, I just prefer edibles. Me personally, I found my dose is 15 milligrams, 10 if I'm looking to kind of just be a little bit relaxed, 20 if you want to go to a little more buttery.
Yeah.
So that's my range, and that's where I stay. And yeah, I find for most things, if I have to step up to an Advil now, I try to keep it very limited. I used to eat Advil like Skittles, and it increases your stroke risk. It increases all kinds of other issues. So I've really only used that when I have to now. I prefer to stick with CBD or CBN. I'm excited to get into CBG. Some of the products are cool. I just saw Wana Brands actually has a THCV for weight loss.
Yep.
Available in Colorado. That looks super cool. I would love to get my hands on that. So,
I think people are pretty excited about that product.
That looks amazing. And I listened to your podcast about the study. They did a clinical trial on it too, which is super cool. So cannabis is offering so much these days, whether you isolate the molecule or blend it together.
Well, Colleen, this has been such an interesting conversation. If people want to find out more about you and the book, where should they go?
They can go to elevatethecannabisexperience.com. That will also bring you to a free webinar. So if you're looking to get any information on the course that's coming up and learn a lot more, sign up for that free webinar. And my book's available through there as well, and on Amazon and the whole thing. And I'm always putting up information. And I do coaching. So if people are looking to have someone specifically choose their products at their dispensary, I do that for a fee. But if you just have a question on a dose or this or that, please send me an email. I'm happy to answer everybody's questions. It's what pharmacists do. We answer questions all day long.
All day long. That's interesting. So if people want to work with you personally, because you're in Connecticut and might not be as familiar with, like, say, the California brands, is it better to find a local pharmacist who is more familiar with the brands that are in your state?
Might be tough to find a local pharmacist, which is why they reach out. My friends live in California, and they're like, we wish we had you here.
I know.
But you tell me what dispensary you're going to, and your products are online.
So you can see.
So I look at the products, I'm able to look at the dosing and then figure out the dosing, because that's what gets most people is, I don't know how much to take, how often to take it, which products should I get for my pain. My father just had a knee replacement. What should I give him? And so I can go on the product list, find the most appropriate products, usually one for day, usually a separate one for night, and then go with the dosing regimen. And we talk back and forth. And if there's any questions, because once they're off and running, they don't need me anymore. That's what we want. We want patients to be empowered and educated so they know how to take their medications.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much for doing the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it, John. And this was fun. Thanks so much.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in North America. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, head on over to wanabrands.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, brands.com.